Hey, my friends. So, this has been on my mind to do just a little experiment, and I happen to have a few minutes now to try it. What I thought would be fun, one of the reasons why I started to learn to read Pip decks and why Tarot on Earth came to be was my sort of frustration with the feeling that tarot could that tarot wasn't as practical as other systems were. And I found that not to be true. I just felt like we had taught ourselves to read a certain way, and we could teach ourselves to read in a different way if we wanted to. And that wouldn't it be great if we had both methods, so that you could take a sort of psycho-spiritual approach, or a more practical approach. And I think that doing the work that I did in Tarot on Earth certainly got me closer to that. I wouldn't say I'm anywhere near perfect, of course, but it definitely helped me ground my readings, which of course is why Tarot on Earth has the title that it does. It's about tarot literally on Earth, on the ground, being grounded. But what I thought might be fun to do is actually just compare the voices of a few different systems. Because I will say, I've done a couple of readings on Sybilla and how Sybilla can have a very, it reminds me of Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost. You know what I mean? Like, you in danger, girl. Sybilla frequently in my readings seems to say, hey, here's the thing you got to look out for. And I don't see that, for example, as much in my tarot readings. Now, I also pulled out a Kipper and a Lenormand deck, which, if you watch my videos at all, you know that I'm not sort of well versed in these two systems. Lenormand, I've been exploring for several years, and I feel like I'm just starting to have a breakthrough with it, in part because of Sybilla. I think in the way that Sybilla taught me to think, to think about the literalness of the thing, but then look beyond what that means in context. And you'll sort of see what I mean by that if you look at my my Sybilla primer videos. There's 5 of them right now. So what I thought might be interesting is actually just to compare, sort of random draws of the cards for the same question, and look at not the answer specifically, because the answer, of course, will be different because we're going to get different draws in all of the cases, right? But what I thought it would be interesting to do is look at the voice, or listen to the voice, the way that each of these systems delivers its message, just as a way of like comparing, what they do and why potentially you might use one or the other for a given reading or for a given thing. And I really, this is an experiment because I really don't know what they're going to say and how they're going to react. So I thought I would start with Tarot and Sybilla and sort of look at an example, and then come and look at Lenormand and Kipper a little bit later in the process, just to compare. And I'm going to move this over. Do you like my new crystal ball? Isn't this cool? It's not, it's not like pure quartz. It is quartz, actually, but it's what they call reconstituted quartz. It is melted down and then reconstituted, obviously, into something incredibly clear, and it's beautiful. It's just sort of like super cool. So anyway, I got this, and you have to keep it out of direct sunlight because it will actually start a fire. But I thought it was cool and I wanted to share that. So but here's a Blame Kelly moment. The 7th sphere Lenormand, which I'll use in this example. And I wasn't going to get it because, of course, I keep buying Lenormand readings decks, and I'm not good at it yet. But there aren't a lot of Kipper decks, and there definitely aren't a lot of Sybilla decks. So I'm like trying to, I would love a new one. In fact, I tried to seduce a certain member of our community into creating one. And if I have to, send flowers or chocolates or something, I may continue to do that. But anyway, but I saw her video on this, and they're coming out with a Marseille style deck that's going to match this. And so I said, what the hell? So let's just look at a question, for example. Let's just sort of say something simple like, what what's on the horizon in the next 3 months for my love life, right? So let's say we have a client, we'll decide that it's a woman, and that could matter, of course, in these other systems. So we'll say it's a woman who wants to know what's her prospects, or what's the trajectory of her love life for the next 3 months. We'll say that we know she's single, and that she's actively dating. So a little bit of context goes a long way, I think, and that'll help us in this example. So, this is really just playing, because it's really more about, again, it's not about the specific answer, it's about the style, or the voice of the answer, and just getting a sense of, like, how do they feel? Because I've never really thought about this much. Well, that's not true. I've never really experimented in this way. I think about it all the time. Like, why would you choose one system over another? So I'm just gonna draw 3 cards. I'm shuffling rather a lot because it's habit. But of course, this isn't a real reading. So this is the CBD Marseille Tarot, and then this is the Sybilla Originale, which is the Il Meneghello version of the Everyday Oracle. I just find, I like the Everyday Oracle a lot. I like the Gypsy Oracle cards a lot. They have more shuffleable cardstock, but this deck I just find a little prettier on the eyes. So I've been using this one a little bit more lately. It doesn't bridge all that well. See, it doesn't bridge shuffle all that well, but it shuffles decently. So, normally you do use reversals in Sibilla, so again, normally that's kind of how I do it. I would also say that one of the things that would likely happen is in both of these cases, I would probably use 9-card spreads to answer this question, especially for Sybilla. But the reality is this, again, this is just an experiment. All right. So what did we get for the tarot? We got the 2 of Cups reversed, the Pope reversed, and the Emperor. And then for Sybilla, we got Lightness reversed, we got the Soldier, and the Servant. So you can see right out of the gate, you know what I mean? Like, the answers, the contexts are very different. So let me just do the math with you all. So I'll kind of talk through my inner monologue to show you how I arrived where I did, and then we'll kind of compare the kind of answer we got. So, in this example, we've got the 2 of Cups reversed, which suggests right out of the gate, you know what I mean? Just having the 2 of Cups reversed, even without looking at meaning, suggests the idea of kind of a dry spell, and the influence of someone. We have 2 very strong male characters. We have the Pope reversed, which suggests kind of a slavishness to tradition. And then the Emperor, who of course is very similar. I'm looking at the Pope in sort of a shadow position because it's reversed, and the Emperor upright. But what I have is a pretty arid spell, because I would say that the men that are sort of within her trajectory, within her life right now, are actually pretty belligerent and not super open, not super emotional. So in the next 3 months, it looks like there's not a whole lot of chance of a relationship growing, of 2 things coming together, because the men out there are either going to be sort of like zealots or slightly arrogant and difficult to work with, difficult to deal with. The Emperor could suggest an idea of looking at, if we just look at the visual images here, you kind of get the sense of like the Emperor taking this club and bashing tradition. And so what this could also say is give us a little bit of advice, which is like, if she becomes the Emperor, what she may have to do is sort of like change her expectations about what kind of man she's out there looking for, what kind of relationship she wants. She may have to sort of like bash a really unhelpful tradition in order to kind of reverse this. But so that's my math, right? I'm sort of thinking all of this through and talking all of this through. Now I have to answer the question, which is what's up for my love life in the next 3 months. It looks like it's going to be a fairly dry spell because of the kinds of men that are going to be around you are either going to be somewhat held to tradition, somewhat conservative, and somewhat belligerent in their in their treatment. So they're not going to be incredibly emotional, and they're not going to be really sort of like the kind of people who inspire you to want to go and open up to them, and sort of create a relationship with them. But if you want to do something about that, you may just want to go out there and sort of bash, bash those kinds of dudes, over the head, metaphorically, to kind of clear away the energy. But looking at this as answering the question that was asked, which is ultimately the most important thing, is it looks like it's going to be a pretty dry spell because the men around you are going to be kind of belligerent, kind of zealous, kind of conservative, and not super open. Now, interestingly, the Sybilla reading has a similar structure, because we have lightness, and then we have a soldier, and we have a servant, and so I use similar language. But if I were going to do the answer with Sybilla, I'd say it's lightness reverse. So again, I'm going to give you my math, right? I'm going to do my solving the equation out loud. With Sybilla, I find it easier to, I will say, do the math in my head a little bit more than with tarot, for some reason, because there's less correspondence. So in this case, I have to sort of figure out what the reversal suggests, and then I have to figure out what the Two of Cups reversed means numerologically and contextually. I have to figure out what the Pope means reversed contextually, what the Emperor means contextually, each in the context of the question. And then I have to sort of look at the image, look at the picture overall, and sort of, dig into what that suggests. Now, ultimately, the idea that I came up with about, like, you may need to be the emperor and sort of bash, like, outdated tradition over the head, like, that wasn't super helpful because it didn't answer the question. But I do look at that. So there's a little bit more math. There are a little bit more steps with tarot, I feel like, just sort of like going through this now. What I have to do here is similar, but there's less steps, right? Because there's no elemental correspondences, there's no archetypes to figure out, and by and large, the images to me don't matter all that much. So we've got lightness reversed, we've got the soldier, and we've got the servant. So lightness reversed could mean being frivolous. You know what I mean? So lightness upright would suggest to me a feeling of buoyancy, a feeling of breeziness. When I look at it reversed, I think about it, in its literal reversed, in a shadow mode, in essence, which makes me think about heaviness or frivolity. So we've got the soldier, which to me is very similar to the Emperor card, and we've got the servant, which in a way to me is similar to the magician, the Pope reversed, because the Pope reversed to me made me think about, like, slavishness to religion, slavishness to a cause or conservatism, and the domestic, the servant, is in essence he serves something else. So I get a very similar answer, actually, but it's a little more terse. It's a little, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a little bitchier. Maybe that's an offensive word and I shouldn't say it, but I do feel, and that's just me, because I feel like it has a little bit more of a girlfriend quality. You know what I mean? Just sort of to go into gender stereotypes, I guess. It's like, look, it's not going to be fun because the guys out there are going to be belligerent and kind of servile. So again, I'm influenced by this, and it's hard not to be, right? So, like, I can't help but see the correspondence between these two sets. You know what I mean? If I were to ignore that, because I would never really do a reading with Sybilla and tarot at the same time, you know what I mean? I would say it's not going to be a very fun time. It's not going to be sort of a breezy time. It's going to be pretty heavy, because the guys out there are pretty serious, and they're pretty slavish. They're pretty slavish to their thing. They're soldiering. You know what I mean? So whatever it is that they're fighting for, which again I think does have a similar message to these two. It just took me a little bit less time to get there. Again, it's hard to unknow what we know. So after having done this reading, even though this is not a real person, it's hard to kind of unsee this. Yeah, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be breezy. It's going to be kind of heavy because the guys out there are really in service to the things they care about. Again, I would probably, especially with Sybilla, do 9 cards to find out what that is. But in essence, I got kind of to the same place in a weird way. It's just that this one was a little faster. So like voice wise, I don't really see a whole lot of difference except that there's a little bit more of like a bluntness to this. Let's try one more before we bring the other two systems into the fold. It's interesting, right? Because I have no preconceived notions about this. I know what people have told me over the years, but I don't, you know what I mean? I don't. To me, it's all one, right? But I do notice little differences in the voice of the reading, you know what I mean? So to me, I think you'll get the answer that you need to get regardless of what system you use. You know, I generally find Sybilla a little faster to get there. So that's one thing I can say about it, is that it kind of requires less sinking in and it's less cerebral in a way. Let's try a dude who let's do another love reading because it's almost Valentine's Day. So here's a guy who really likes this girl, and he wants to know, you know, what the chances are of them becoming a real item. So with the 2 of Coins reversed, the Page of Cups, and the Ace of Swords reversed. Now, because I use reversals with Marseille decks in particular, and with court cards specifically, I would say, you know, right out of the gate that we know he is represented in this case by the Page of Cups because it's upright, so it's him. But let's just sort of get a draw for Sybilla too. It's interesting how those two previous sets were so similar. And even though I was so influenced by the first one, that in essence they were very similar cards. Which I would expect more in like a real reading, but who knows? All right. So for this Sybilla reading, we'll get Disaster, the Young Woman reversed, and the Servant again reversed. So this isn't looking good for our buddy here. Just in terms of significators, because this is a relationship reading and it's about a straight man asking about a woman, I would probably take the young woman in this case as a significator of her, or at least look at it from that point of view. Normally when I see the young woman in a reading more generally, she represents a stage of development, because in a Sybilla deck we've got the child, the young woman, and the old woman. And so to me it represents sort of like something that's nascent, or something that's a seed, something that's really young, something that's pubescent, or something that's developing, and then something that is wise. And actually, if you take that continuum, you can include the wife in that too, although I tend not to view the wife in that flow, but you very certainly could. The wife to me speaks of being a partner. So the 2 of Coins reversed. Again, we have another 2 reversed at the beginning of our reading. So again, let me speak my math out loud for you. Again, we have something not coming together. This, in this case, may suggest the idea of competing responsibilities. So the Page of Cups, which is him, is looking at like competing responsibilities, and he's not able to choose between them. So there's a strong possibility that the relationship, while he wants it to go where he wants it to, he wants it to get better, he's actually not super able to make a decision about what he really is dedicated to, what he's really responsible to, what he has a connection to, and because he's probably really immature emotionally in some ways. So this may suggest that he's really, this is probably the first time he's kind of wanted a relationship like this, and he can't quite make up his mind about, like, for example, work in this relationship, what really needs his focus, or maybe there's another woman that he has his eye on. Maybe they haven't been uh maybe they haven't like declared themselves like a official couple or like a monogamous couple yet, so there's the possibility there. And he even though he wants it to be serious, like he can't quite make up his mind, because again this too is reversed, so it's in shadow. And he's sort of naive about his willingness to commit to one thing. And then we have the Ace of Swords reversed, which suggests to me, again, like a stalled epiphany, a stalled realization. So it's likely that he's not mature enough yet to really make a commitment. So to answer the question, does this relationship have a chance? Right now, it doesn't look like it does, because it's not about her. He's not quite as ready as he feels like he is, or as he hopes he is. So, that's what it looks like to me right now. Now, if you notice, I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about the Ace of Swords, especially when I looked at the other two cards a lot more closely. This combination is really unified because, of course, our buddy is looking so strongly at this. This is behind him. He's not looking at it, and it's reversed. So it's almost like a negation. It does cut. It has very, like, cutting quality to it. And again, I got it pretty quickly, the idea of like a delayed epiphany, or a realization that's not coming to, which suggests to me that even if I were to do this reading for him, he may not even hear what I have to say. You know what I mean? He may not really even believe me. He may walk out of here saying, oh, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. All right, so this one, again, pretty quick. I think it's a pretty straightforward no. You know what I mean? We get a disaster card right out of the gate. We've got the woman reversed looking at it, and then the servant reversed not looking at it. So again, you know what I mean? It's hard to unknow what I know. But so just to sort of like pull these aside for a second, I would say no. She's really thinking about, she's not super happy, and she's thinking about what can go wrong. And you're not really as happy as you think you are either, and you're in service to something else. Again, because he's a servant and he's looking in a different direction. So if I were to be influenced by this reading, it's, I would say this combination here has a lot to do with this. So the servant, in a way, to me, is the Page of Cups looking at something else. So she's thinking about what can go wrong, and he's like, I'm not even really all that into you. So it's interesting, again. So the answers feel like they're pretty the same. This is a lot more dramatic. This was a little more nebulous, because I wasn't quite able to pinpoint like what these two things are. And I still don't know what he's thinking about, which may suggest that he doesn't. He doesn't know what he's trying to choose between. She, though, is like not super happy, and she's really anxious about where things are going, and likely doesn't have high expectations for it. Now, let's bring in our other friends here and see how they, what they bring to the party in terms of a similar message. So let's start with Lenormand. And I'm not going to choose a significator for this, just because I always like to see if it comes in on its own. And happily, this is a system that you never need reversals with, so... This deck doesn't bridge shuffle all that well either. Of course, it takes saying that to make it bridge shuffle well. It's weird, this plastic. I like it, and I don't. It's really odd. All right, so again, this isn't a real reading, so I don't need to go crazy, but let's go through. So again, same situation, same dude. So in this case, we've got Coffin, Moon, and Heart. So this, to me, has a much more, Lenormand is known for being so practical. This, to me, gives a much more sort of poetic answer to the question. And I would say, ultimately, and I'm kind of drawn to read it this way, backwards, which is that your feelings are actually sort of dark, and the relationship, ultimately, is not a long-term one. Your feelings are not in the light, The Moon is always a card that's hard for me to be straight up, because it to me is more about like reputation, but contextually, it just seems to be like the darkness matters so much, especially if you. And again, I know the images aren't supposed to matter, but fuck it. They're all they're all at night, but your feelings, your emotions are not clear. They're not bright, they're not out in the sunlight, and it's gonna end. So that is a similar message in a way. It says the same thing in a different way. And then let's try Kipper. Now, theoretically, in Kipper, you would always use a significator, because what's in front and behind you will matter. So I'll use it, but what I'm going to do is just draw the 3 cards that he's looking at. And again, we don't use reversals with Kipper. And again, Kipper is the one I'm newest to, so... there he is. All right. So, if I'm going by the Card Geek book... Can you see these? Yes. If I'm going by the Card Geek book, theoretically... these are in front of him, so they would be read auspiciously, which means that they'd be read as something survivable. But again, interestingly, it's not a good outcome for our fella here. He's sort of idealistic about what's going to happen, in his environment, but actually he feels trapped by it and he's not happy. So again, he's just this isn't working out well for him. So it's interesting because in all cases we got a kind of a negative answer. So the answer is there's not a whole lot of potential in this relationship. And interestingly as well, you could of the bunch, I think you could fault my reading of the Lenormand most. Right? It's of the bunch, it's the one I have the least affinity for some reason out of the gate. Tarot I've been studying for a long time. Sybilla just started talking to me pretty easily. We just sort of got on really well. Kipper, I'm getting there with. There's a lot to know with Kipper. It feels like out of all of these systems, there's the most to know about Kipper. With all the directions and the movements and the Grand Tableau in a Kipper is like OMG. But I do have, I feel like I get more intuitive hits. Lenormand, I struggle with more. And weirdly, it's the deck with the fewest people in it. That could be it. It's also the one with the least amount of metaphor. In a weird way. It's so easy for me to look at a house and think about your environment in prison, to think about your being trapped. And it's so easy for me to look at a servant as being in service to something, or at least, serving something else. It's easy for me to look at a young woman and think beyond that in terms of a state of development into something that's in development, or that's pubescent in a way. And then of course tarot is insanely flexible. So it's harder in a weird way. Of the 3 I feel most connected to, tarot is the one that I've been reading the longest, and it's in a weird way the one that feels like the most work. But you can see that I got more or less the same answer from all 3. And then when I look at the Lenormand spread, theoretically it really, because I drew them this way, it really should go 1, 2, 3. There's no one pushing me in this direction. And the coffin card really gives me my answer right out of the gate. No. And so then I struggle with the moon to explain more. Again, it's an odd thing. It's only in reading it backwards do I really find myself able to make sense of it. Your feelings are dark. Your feelings are not light. You're not seeing your feelings the way that they are, and it's ending. You could go, I guess, the other way and say that it's ending because of the darkness of your feelings, the lack of clarity, the lack of light on what you really feel, I guess. So I guess you could say the same thing. And weirdly, I feel like the answers are, again, they're more or less the same. The voices aren't even all that different. You know what I mean? Should should we do one more? I'm gonna pause for a second, but I think maybe we'll try one more. All right, let's try one more, and we'll get out of the the love mode for a minute and look at work. So, I was gonna do a yes or no question. I have to be honest, and I'll probably do a video at some point about this, although not in the next few weeks. I have a very busy February coming up, so I wouldn't anticipate a lot more videos this month. But I've really come to dislike sort of flat out yes or no questions. Let's say that this person wants to know how much potential there is for a promotion. So we'll say it's a woman who's applying for promotion. She wants to know how much potential there is right now. So I'm not going to shuffle as much. I just want to sort of randomize things. So we've got the Wheel of Fortune, we've got the Knight of Swords, and we've got the Devil. This is an interesting spread for a question like this. Ugh, I hate making a mess. But I do it so well. All right. It might be interesting, in a real reading to sort of like, I talk a lot about how Camellia Elias talks about finding evidence. It might be interesting to do a tarot reading, and then validate it with another system, because so far they've been pretty good at that, although these have been fake. All right, so for the Sybilla, we got the house reversed, the enemy reversed, and sickness. Let's just go ahead and do the other two while I'm at it. And what I may do this time is actually go backwards and not start with the tarot, because that has been very influential on each of the bunch. So it'd be interesting in just in a different context. And again, theoretically, you would use the anchor card or something like it, the fox, to represent work. But I'm just going to see what pops up here. There's the moon again, my favorite. And then we have the dog. And we have the crossroad. And then I'm not going to bother with the woman significator this time, just because you get the idea. It's more about the message, not about the finer. The way that you read Lenormand, the way that you read Kipper, and theoretically, some would argue the way that you read Sybilla are all very similar, are all very different, rather. And I mentioned this recently too. One of the things that I found out in reading Robert M. Place's new book is that all of these systems, all of these cartomancy systems, are really sort of inspired by a deck called Hooper's Conversation Cards, which are very, very similar, especially to Kipper and Sybilla. There's no evidence that those were meant to be divinatory. Boy, this is so crooked. Perfectionists beware. All right. And I actually see less similarities from system to system here, so I'm going to just go with it. We've got the journey, we've got sad news, and we've got great fortune. So here's an interesting combination. And it's one reason why significators are helpful, it seems like, in Kipper, because the way things are moving and the way people are looking at, like, here's a movement card, this is a linking card, and this is a stop card. So it's an interesting thing, but it looks like she's moving away from sad news and good fortune. So it looks like an opportunity, a fortunate opportunity actually doesn't go her way, and she ends up sort of taking another path. So, and you could draw more cards, again, to sort of see, you'd want to theoretically draw a card up above the journey card to see what she's moving to. Theoretically, this card links this to, so sad news links great news and journey, so great fortune. So there's like a good opportunity, but the sad news sort of gets in the way of the journey. So looks like it's not, in that regard, a good. There's not a whole lot of potential right now. Then we look at Lenormand again. We've got the moon, we've got dog, and we've got crossroads. So this I would read sort of that she actually has a reputation for being really loyal, and it's in a way it's sort of hers to choose. So this reading sort of seems a little bit more like it's a better prospect. Again, you can see why it's like you kind of want more cards here, because what do you choose? What is she choosing between? But it does look like, her reputation for being loyal may make it easier for them to choose, or for her to take a new path. So that's a good thing. Looking at the Sybilla reading, this is a situation now where all the readings have very sort of different answers. The Sybilla goes back to not being a great option. It looks like, house reversed, thief, enemy reversed, and sickness. So sickness, when it's not related to health, which is most of the time, I look at sort of just feeling dis-ease or uneasy, or just not good. And it looks like, the house in this case would probably represent the job. And the enemy reversed suggests like not maliciousness per se, but still it's something's working against her at work. So it looks like, at work something's working against her. She's not going to feel great. So that says that the possibility doesn't look very possible. So again, in all of these cases, it's a pretty quick answer. And so when people say that these systems are fast, I think that's fair, because tarot does it. I don't think it's less practical. I don't think it's less useful or less grounded. What it does require is a little bit more mining. Looking at all of these, you can kind of get an answer really quickly. In this case, to get to the answer, you have to dig a little bit more. I feel like there's a little bit more math to do. Again, based on the kind of system you use. So we have no pip cards here, which is interesting. We have the Knight of Swords, which is her, because it's upright. We have the Wheel of Fortune, and we've got the Devil. Now, if I just look at the trajectory, she's moving away from something, moving away from the Devil towards the Wheel of Fortune. She's smart. She's like motivated. She's ready to go and sort of conquer her path, but behind her is sort of an attachment. She's got an attachment to something that hasn't been helpful, that may be holding her back. So in this case, this is a little bit more of a nebulous spread, because the Wheel of Fortune sort of ending the reading, and again, I'm following the Knight as sort of the person who's pointing to what needs to be pointed at. It ends in the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune could go in different directions. This bodes well for her personality, but the Devil behind there may be something in her past, that reputationally may be problematic for her. So it's going to be a harder swing. So the potential is there, but it's not a lock, essentially, is what I would say in that case. So again, it's a less definitive answer. This felt like a sort of fairly positive, yeah, there's some potential, or yes, you have some potential. Now, it wasn't a yes or no question I asked, was it? It's like, what's the potential? So the potential in this case was, there might be some potential. This was probably not. And this is sort of like, it's unknown right now because of something that's in your past, might be holding you back from really sort of climbing to the top. But it's still possible because the wheel turns. So, but in the bunch, this was an interesting case because none of them were really all of that similar. So it's funny to explore it from that regard. Of the four, in this case, probably this answer would be the most frustrating to a client. But I don't necessarily think a definitive, like, yeah, there's potential or there's no potential is helpful in a lot of cases, because sometimes we're wrong, about what's going. I think when we do predictive readings and it's like underlying a yes or no, one of the things that happens is so much is unformed, that I find like yes or no, or like, am I going to get this job kinds of questions are frequently wrong because there's so many factors at play. But this is a case where each system sort of said something else. And I'm a big believer of with tarot you keep digging until you get a good answer. I just feel like with tarot you also have to dig a lot more, and sometimes the answer is it's unknown. You know what I mean? In a way, this one and this one also had unknowns, so it's not fair to say necessarily that tarot is more vague. This, we could draw more cards in all of these to find out more. What is she choosing between, and what's she going to choose? Where is she going now that the sad, like an opportunity isn't hers? How does she end up? You know what I mean? Like, what's the likely? Where's the wheel likely to turn right now? To the six of wands. So hey, that actually bodes well. You know what I mean? There's some beautiful passion there, so that could carry the day, and she could sort of take the fire from the devil and use it as an example to sort of push her to the top. You know what I mean? So you could draw more cards in all of these cases. Where's she traveling to? A courtship. She's traveling to the potential for something that's a bet. That's a nice meeting. That's a nice together. What's she going to choose between? Conflict and block. So suddenly this whole reading is less sexy than it was, because your reputation is going to allow you to, loyalty is going to allow you to choose, but you have to choose between like a really hard journey or sort of getting smacked around by life. So you know what I mean? Like, in all of these cases you can clarify if you need to, but adding another card can completely change the thing. And this is why 3 cards is like the minimum I would do for any of these. I never do 1 card tarot readings anymore. 9 is sort of my ideal, and like I always say, my favorite spread is the Council of 13. I just don't use it as much because it's so huge it's hard to fit on camera. So my verdict so far is that their voices are not as different as they have a reputation for being. I think that they get us to the same place. It's just that the way they get us there is a little bit different. And the effort, tarot is a lot more effortful to me. It requires a lot more digging, but Lenormand is not easy either. And sometimes the Sybilla and Kipper tend to be easier for me so far. But also sometimes like it being easy means that you stop digging and you just accept the easy answer without going in and checking your work. So I think there are pros and cons to both. I don't think that they're all that different ultimately. I think the way you use the tool, the kinds of questions you ask, the approach that you take, your own preferences, your own worldview, all of those things have a lot more to do with the answers you give and get than the system. Ultimately, I think the system is a matter of taste, and it's a matter of like, how deep do you want to go? How much effort do you want to put into it? I feel like with tarot, if you want to sort of dig into something, if you want the feeling of solving a puzzle, you're going to get that more than with Sybilla. With Sybilla, if you're like, I just need to know like super quick what's up, it's like the fast food, and tarot is like the home cooking in a weird way. They both fill you up. They both have pros and cons. It's just what do you feel like eating tonight? So anyway, that's my thoughts on this. This was fun to do, though. Let me know what you think. Let me know if your experiences have been different, because I'm always curious. And again, be good.